Before we begin, I need to tell you something about this book, something that most people who have never read it do not know. The Tao Te Ching by Lao Tzu is not a philosophy book. Not exactly. It is not an argument. It does not try to prove anything. It does not build a case. It does not assemble premises and draw conclusions. It is something far older than argument, far quieter than proof, far more difficult to hold than any conclusion. It is 81 verses, written in Chinese, more than 2,500 years ago, by a man named Lao Tzu, which means old master, about whom almost nothing is known. He may have been a keeper of the royal archives in the state of Zhou during the period of the Warring States. He may have known Confucius, who said of him that meeting Lao Tzu was like encountering a dragon. He may have written nothing at all, and the verses attributed to him may have accumulated over many generations, from many hands, many minds, many moments of quiet seeing. Or he may have written them himself, all 81, in one sitting, at the border of the kingdom, on the day he left civilization and rode into the wilderness on a water buffalo, and was never seen again. The legend says a border guard stopped him and begged him, "Before you go, leave us something we can keep, something we can hold." And Lao Tzu sat down and wrote 5,000 characters, 81 verses, the entire Tao Te Ching. And then he rode away into the wilderness and was never seen again. Whether this is true does not matter. What matters is what he wrote. And what he wrote is the most translated book in the history of the world, after the Bible, in every language, on every continent, in every century since it was written. The same 81 verses, copied and copied again, and copied again, because something in them will not be left alone, will not be dismissed, will not expire, because truth does not expire, even the quiet kind, especially the quiet kind. This is the Tao Te Ching by Lao Tzu, Part 1, Chapters 1 through 40. Let us begin. Slowly. There is no other way. Lao Tzu writes, "The Tao that can be told is not the eternal Tao. The name that can be named is not the eternal name. The nameless is the beginning of heaven and earth. The named is the mother of 10,000 things." Stop here, before we go any further. The first 4 lines of the most translated book in the history of the world. The Tao that can be told is not the eternal Tao. What does this mean? It means the moment you say what the Tao is, you have said what it is not. Because the Tao, the way, the path, the principle behind everything, is not a thing. It is not an object that can be pointed at, not a rule that can be written down, not a God that can be named and worshipped, not an idea that can be argued for and against. The Tao is the ground beneath all of these, the silence inside all words, the stillness inside all movement. And the moment you name it, you have already missed it, because the name is not the thing. The word water will not quench your thirst. The word fire will not warm your hands. The word Tao is not the Tao. He continues, Ever desireless, one can see the mystery. Ever desiring, one can see the manifestations. These two spring from the same source, but differ in name. This appears as darkness. Darkness within darkness, the gate to all mystery. Darkness within darkness, the gate to all mystery. Not a bright, clear answer, not the confident declaration of what truth is. Darkness within darkness, the acknowledgement that what is most real cannot be seen directly, cannot be grasped, cannot be named, cannot be captured in a sentence, or a system, or a philosophy, only approached, only glimpsed in the darkness within the darkness. This is chapter 1. This is the beginning of the most important 5,000 characters ever written in any language, in any time, by anyone. The Tao that can be told is not the eternal Tao. Remember this. As we go forward, everything else depends on it. Lao Tzu writes, "When people see some things as beautiful, other things become ugly. When people see some things as good, other things become bad." Stop again. This is not obvious. It only sounds obvious. When we say this is beautiful, we are also saying something else is not beautiful. When we say this is good, we are simultaneously saying something else is not good. The categories that we use to praise are the same categories that we use to condemn. You cannot have one without the other. He continues, being and non-being create each other. Difficult and easy support each other. Long and short define each other. High and low depend on each other. Before and after follow each other. Everything in pairs. Every concept contains its opposite. Being requires non-being. Without emptiness, there is no form. Difficult requires easy. Without hardship, ease is meaningless. High requires low. The mountain has no height. He continues, therefore the master acts without doing anything and teaches without saying anything. Things arise and she lets them come. Things disappear and she lets them go. She has but doesn't possess, acts but doesn't expect. When her work is done, she forgets it. That is why it lasts forever. That is why it lasts forever. The work done without attachment to the doing, the teaching given without insisting on the learning, the gift offered without requiring gratitude. This is the Tao in action, not forcing, not grasping, not holding, just doing what needs doing, and then releasing it. And because it is released, it remains. Because the hand is open, it can receive. Because the work is forgotten, it is remembered forever. Lao Tzu writes, not exalting the gifted prevents quarreling. Not collecting treasures prevents stealing. Not seeing desirable things prevents confusion of the heart. He is saying something radical. The trouble in the world does not come from evil people. It comes from the objects of desire, the prizes, the positions, the things that people compete for. Create a prize, and you create the desire to win it, and the resentment of those who do not, and the corruption of those who do. Remove the prize, and the competition dissolves. He continues, the master leads by emptying people's minds and filling their cores, by weakening their ambition and toughening their resolve. He helps people lose everything they know, everything they desire, and creates confusion in those who think they know. Practice not doing, and everything will fall into place. Practice not doing, Wu Wei, the most important concept in the Tao Te Ching. Not passivity, not laziness, not giving up. Action that is in perfect harmony with the nature of things. The way water flows downhill without effort, without resistance, without struggle. It goes where it goes, because that is where water goes. Not because it is trying, not because it is striving, because it is fully what it is. And the person who has found the Tao is like water, acts like water, goes where the Tao takes them, without resistance, without grasping, without the noise of ambition and desire, drowning out the quiet voice of what actually needs doing. Practice not doing, and everything will fall into place. Lao Tzu writes, "The Tao is like a well, used but never used up. It is like the eternal void, filled with infinite possibilities. It is hidden but always present. I don't know who gave birth to it. It is older than God." Older than God, the most radical claim in the first 4 chapters. The Tao is older than God. Or rather, the Tao is what God comes from, what anything comes from, what everything comes from. The ground beneath the ground, the silence before the word, the emptiness that makes all fullness possible. Used but never used up, the well that never runs dry. Not because it is large, but because it is connected to something that has no size. The Tao, which is not a thing, which is the source of all things, which is older than God, and did not need to be created because it was never not there. This is chapter 4, 6 lines that took 2,500 years to stop reverberating and have not stopped yet. Lao Tzu writes, "Heaven and earth are ruthless. They see the 10,000 things as dummies. The wise are ruthless. They see the people as dummies." The most shocking chapter in the Tao Te Ching for the Western reader. Heaven and earth are ruthless, not kind, not caring, not arranged for our benefit. Heaven and earth treat all of creation like straw dogs, used in a ceremony, honored before, discarded after, without sentiment, without cruelty either, just without the category. The rain falls on the just and the unjust. The earthquake does not spare the good man. The flood does not check whether you deserved it. Heaven and earth are ruthless, not because they hate us, because they are beyond the categories of love and hate. He continues, "The space between heaven and earth is like a bellows. The shape changes, but not the form. The more it moves, the more it yields. More words count less. Hold fast to the center, not to the words, not to the arguments, not to the positions we defend, and the opinions we carry. The center, the still point, around which everything else moves, without moving itself. This is the Tao. This is what the sage holds. More words count less. Hold fast to the center. This is all the advice you will ever need. From the Tao Te Ching, in one sentence. More words count less. Hold fast to the center. Lao Tzu writes, "The valley spirit never dies. It is called the mysterious female. The gateway of the mysterious female is called the root of heaven and earth. Dimly visible, it seems as if it were there, yet use will never drain it. The valley spirit, the valley, not the mountain. The mountain is visible. The mountain is tall and dramatic. The mountain is what people point to and say, there, that is greatness. But the valley is where the water gathers, where the rivers run, where the life is, where the soil is richest. The valley spirit never dies because it is low, because it receives, because it does not compete for height. The mysterious female, the Tao, is feminine, not in gender, in principle, yielding, receptive, creative, sustaining, the root of heaven and earth, not the peak, not the pinnacle, not the highest point, the root, the foundation, the source from which everything grows and to which everything returns. Dimly visible, it seems as if it were there, not blazing, not obvious, not announcing itself, just there, quietly, always. And use will never drain it, because the valley is always ready to receive, and the root is always ready to give, and the source is always ready to begin again. This is the Tao, the valley spirit that never dies. Lao Tzu writes, "Heaven and earth last forever." Why do heaven and earth last forever? They are unborn, so ever living. The sage stays behind, thus she is ahead. She is detached, thus at one with all. Through selfless action, she attains fulfillment. The sage stays behind, thus she is ahead. The paradox, the first of many. The person who insists on going first will arrive last, or not arrive at all, because insisting on going first means pushing, and pushing means resistance, and resistance means not moving with the flow, but against it. The sage stays behind, not from cowardice, not from weakness, from wisdom, from knowing that the Tao does not reward the pusher, does not reward the striver, does not reward the one who insists on their place at the front. The Tao rewards the one who has forgotten about their place, who is doing the work, not watching to see who gets the credit, who stays behind, and therefore arrives first. She is detached, thus at one with all. Detachment, which sounds cold, and is actually the deepest form of love, because the person who is attached to outcomes and results cannot be fully present to what is actually happening. And the person who is fully present to what is actually happening is at one with all of it, with the joy, with the sorrow, with the person in front of them, with the moment they are in. Through selfless action, she attains fulfillment. The paradox, again, by not seeking fulfillment, by forgetting the self, by acting for the sake of the action rather than for the sake of the reward. Fulfillment comes not as a goal reached, but as the natural state of the person who has stopped reaching. Lao Tzu writes, "The highest good is like water. Water gives life to the 10,000 things and does not strive. It flows in places men reject, and so is like the Tao. The highest good is like water." This single verse is the heart of the Tao Te Ching. If you understand water, you understand everything. Water gives life to the 10,000 things. All living things need water. Without water, nothing lives, nothing grows, nothing continues. Water is the most essential thing, and it does not strive. It does not compete. It does not insist. It does not argue about which direction to go. It simply goes downward, through the cracks, into the low places, the places no one else wants, and in those low places, it gathers and deepens, and eventually becomes the river that shapes the mountain over 10,000 years. He continues, in dwelling, live close to the ground. In thinking, keep to the simple. In conflict, be fair and generous. In governing, don't try to control. In work, do what you enjoy. In family life, be completely present. When you are content to be simply yourself and don't compare or compete, everybody will respect you. When you are content to be simply yourself, not the performance of yourself, not the curated version of yourself, not the self that is always watching to see how it is being received, simply yourself, the way water is simply water, not trying to be more interesting, not trying to be more impressive, not comparing itself to other water, simply what it is, going where it goes, being what it is, giving what it has, and everybody will respect you, not because you competed for their respect, but because you stopped competing and became so fully yourself that there was nothing left to compete with. Water, the highest good, is like water. Lao Tzu writes, "Fill your bowl to the brim, and it will spill. Keep sharpening your knife, and it will blunt. Chase after money and security, and your heart will never unclench. Care about people's approval, and you will be their prisoner. Do your work, then step back. The only path to serenity. Do your work, then step back. The only path to serenity. Not the only path to success. Not the only path to wealth. Not the only path to recognition. The only path to serenity." Lao Tzu is not saying, don't do your work. He is saying, do it, and then release it. The bowl filled to the brim will spill. The knife sharpened past sharpness will blunt. The person who holds on to the work after it is done, who needs to see the results, who needs the approval, who cannot let go, will spill, will blunt, will unravel, because beholding is the problem, not the working. The working is good. The working is necessary. The working is the Tao. In action, but the holding, the clinging, the watching to see if it was enough. This is the departure from the Tao. This is where the serenity ends and the unclenched heart begins. Do your work, then step back. Lao Tzu writes, "Carrying body and soul and embracing the one, can you avoid separation? Attending fully and becoming supple, can you be as a newborn child? Washing and cleansing the primal vision, can you be without stain? Loving all men and ruling the country, can you dispense with cleverness? Opening and closing the gates of heaven, can you play the role of woman? Understanding and being open to all things, are you able to do nothing? Giving birth and nourishing, having without possessing, acting with no expectations, leading and not trying to control, this is the supreme virtue. Having without possessing, acting with no expectations, leading and not trying to control. 3 qualities of the person who has found the Tao. Having without possessing, the person who has things but is not owned by him, who can give what they have, because they are not defined by having it. Acting with no expectations, the person who does what needs doing, without requiring a specific outcome, without needing the world to respond in the way they hoped for. Leading and not trying to control, the person who is followed because they know where they are going, not because they demand to be followed. The leader who does not lead by force or fear or the imposition of will, but by being so clearly on the path that others want to walk behind them. These 3 qualities, together, this is the supreme virtue. This is the Tao made human. Lao Tzu writes, 30 spokes share the wheel's hub. It is the center hole that makes it useful. Shape clay into a vessel. It is the space within that makes it useful. Cut doors and windows for a room. It is the holes which make it useful. Therefore, profit comes from what is there, usefulness from what is not there, usefulness from what is not there. This is the most counterintuitive and most important chapter in the Tao Te Ching. The wheel works not because of the spokes, but because of the empty hub that the spokes point toward. The vessel holds not because of the clay, but because of the empty space that the clay surrounds. The room shelters not because of the walls, but because of the empty space that the walls enclose. In every useful thing, the usefulness comes from what is not there, from the emptiness, from the space, from the nothing that makes the something possible. And what does this mean for a person? The person who is full of opinions, full of knowledge, full of plans, full of ambition, full of their own importance, has no room for anything new, for anything unexpected, for the Tao to move through them. The person who has space, who has emptiness, who has the willingness to not know, to not have the answer, to not be full, has room for everything. This is the usefulness of emptiness. Profit comes from what is there, usefulness from what is not. Lao Tzu writes, "The 5 colors blind the eye, the 5 tones deafen the ear, the 5 flavors dull the taste, racing and hunting madden the mind. Precious things lead one astray. Therefore the sage is guided by what he feels and not by what he sees. He lets go of that and chooses this. He lets go of that and chooses this. The this is the inner life, the felt sense, the quiet knowing that does not depend on the senses. The that is the outer life, the spectacle, the 5 colors, the 5 tones, the 5 flavors, the racing and hunting, the precious things, which are not wrong, which are not evil, which are simply not the Tao. They are the surface, and the Tao is beneath the surface. And the person who lives entirely on the surface becomes blind, not literally, but to what is real, to the inner knowing that the Tao provides, to the quiet voice that says, this way, not that way, here, not there, not the spectacle. He lets go of that and chooses this. Lao Tzu writes, accept disgrace willingly, accept misfortune as the human condition. What do you mean by accept disgrace willingly? Accept being unimportant. Do not be concerned with loss or gain. This is called accepting disgrace willingly. What do you mean by accept misfortune as the human condition? Misfortune comes from having a body. Without a body, how could there be misfortune? Surrender yourself humbly. Then you can be trusted to care for all things. Love the world as your own self. Then you can truly care for all things. Misfortune comes from having a body. This is not pessimism. This is clarity. The body is vulnerable. Always, inevitably, without exception. The body gets hungry and cold and sick and old and eventually dies. And everything that depends on the body is subject to the same vulnerability. The plans we make, the positions we hold, the reputations we build, the relationships we tend, all of these depend on the body. And the body is temporary. And misfortune comes from this, from the gap between what the body needs and what the world provides. This is not bad news, it is honest news. And Lao Tzu says, accept it, not reluctantly, not with gritted teeth, but willingly. Surrender yourself humbly, and from that surrender, that acceptance of what is actually true, you can be trusted to care for all things. Because the person who is fighting the truth cannot be present to anything, and the person who has accepted the truth is free to love the world as their own self, and from that love, to care for all things. Lao Tzu writes, "Look, and it can't be seen. It is below the form of sight. Listen, and it can't be heard. It is below the form of sound. Grasp, and it can't be held. It is below the form of feeling. These three are indefinable, therefore they are joined in one. Look, and it cannot be seen. Listen, and it cannot be heard. Grasp, and it cannot be held. The Tao, which cannot be approached through any of the senses, which is not a color, or a sound, or a texture, which is before all of these, beneath all of these, the ground from which all of these arise." He continues, "From above it is not bright, from below it is not dark. An unbroken thread beyond description, it returns to nothingness, the form of the formless, the image of the imageless. It is called indefinable and beyond imagination. Stand before it, and there is no beginning. Follow it, and there is no end. Stay with the ancient Tao, move with the present. The form of the formless, the image of the imageless. This is what the Tao is, which means it cannot be described, only pointed at, and pointed at again and again and again, until the pointing itself falls away, and what remains is not a description, but a recognition, the ancient Tao that has no beginning and no end, which you can stay with and which you can move with at the same time, because it is not a thing that you either hold or release. It is what holds you always, whether you know it or not." Lao Tzu writes, "The ancient masters were subtle, mysterious, profound, responsive. The depth of their knowledge is unfathomable. Because it is unfathomable, all we can do is describe their appearance. Watchful, like men crossing a winter stream, alert, like men aware of danger, courteous, like visiting guests, yielding, like ice about to melt, simple, like uncarved blocks of wood, hollow, like caves, opaque like muddy pools, watchful like men crossing a winter stream. This is the master, not the person who strides forward, not the confident person who knows the path. The person who crosses carefully, testing each step, aware that the ice may not hold, aware that the current is stronger than it looks, watchful, alert, taking nothing for granted, yielding like ice about to melt. The master knows when to yield, and yields completely, the way ice yields to warmth, without resistance, without the pretense that it will stay ice. Simple like uncarved blocks of wood. The master is not finished, not polished, not the perfect product of careful refinement. The uncarved block that still contains all possibilities, that has not yet been shaped into the one thing that excludes all others. He continues, "Do you have the patience to wait till your mud settles and the water is clear? Can you remain unmoving till the right action arises by itself? Till the right action arises by itself, not forced, not decided in advance, not the product of strategy and calculation, the right action that arises by itself. When the mud settles, when the water clears, when you have had the patience to wait, the master waits, and the action comes, as the right action always comes, when the mud is not stirred, when the water is clear, when the stillness has been honored long enough." Lao Tzu writes, "Empty your mind of all thoughts. Let your heart be at peace. Watch the turmoil of beings, but contemplate their return. Each separate being in the universe returns to the common source. Returning to the source is serenity. If you don't realize the source, you stumble in confusion and sorrow. When you realize where you come from, you naturally become tolerant, disinterested, amused, kind-hearted as a grandmother, dignified as a king. Immersed in the wonder of the Tao, you can deal with whatever life brings you. And when death comes, you are ready. Returning to the source is serenity, not happiness, not pleasure, not success, not any of the things the world promises and cannot deliver. Serenity, which is something different, something deeper, something that does not depend on whether things are going well or badly, on whether you are young or old, rich or poor, praised or ignored. Serenity, where you come from and where you are going, the same place, the source, the Tao. That was before you were born, and will be after you die, and is right now in the breath you are taking, and the heartbeat you are not hearing, and the silence between the words of this sentence. Return to the source, and when death comes, you are ready, not because death is not real, but because you have understood what was real all along, and death is just the return to the source that was always home. Lao Tzu writes, "The best leaders the people do not notice. The next best the people honor and praise. The next the people fear. The next the people hate. If you don't trust the people, you make them untrustworthy. The best leaders' work is done. The people say, 'We did it ourselves.' The best leaders the people do not notice. The leader who makes the people feel that they did it themselves, who gets out of the way, who creates the conditions, who removes the obstacles, who trusts and steps back and lets, and when the work is done, takes no credit, because the Tao takes no credit. The rain falls, the plant grows. Does the rain claim credit for the growth? The sun shines, the fruit ripens. Does the sun require gratitude from the fruit? The Tao gives and gives and gives and never says, "Look what I did." And this is why the Tao is still giving 2,500 years later, without asking, without requiring that anyone notice. The best leaders, the people say, "We did it ourselves." Lao Tzu writes, "When the great Tao is abandoned, charity and righteousness appear. When wisdom and intelligence are born, the great pretense begins. When there is no peace within the family, filial piety and devotion appear. When the country is confused and in chaos, loyal ministers appear." This is one of the most misunderstood chapters. He is not saying that charity is bad, or righteousness, or filial piety, or loyalty. He is saying something far more precise. These things appear as compensation, as substitutes, as what we create when the real thing is lost. When people naturally love each other, there is no need for laws about love. When people naturally live in peace, there is no need for treaties. When families are genuinely close, there is no need for rules about how family members should behave. The rules appear when the living reality has been lost, and the rules are not the living reality. They are the description of what the living reality looked like before it was lost. The map, after the territory is gone, when the great Tao is abandoned, all the things that were simply natural become virtues that must be insisted upon. And insisting on them shows how far from the Tao we have already traveled. The medicine is the evidence of the disease. Lao Tzu writes, "Give up sainthood, renounce wisdom, and it will be 100 times better for everyone. Give up kindness, renounce morality, and men will rediscover filial piety and love. Give up ingenuity, renounce profit, and bandits and thieves will disappear. These three are outward forms alone. They are not sufficient in themselves. It is more important to see the simplicity, to realize one's true nature, to cast off selfishness and temper desire. These three are outward forms alone: sainthood, wisdom, kindness, morality, ingenuity, profit. These are not the Tao. These are descriptions of what the Tao produces in those who live by it. But when the descriptions become the goal, when people try to be saintly rather than being, when people try to appear wise rather than knowing, when people perform kindness rather than loving, the outward form without the inner reality, this is the disaster. Because the outward form without the inner reality is not just incomplete, it is worse than nothing. It is the pretense of the thing, while the thing itself is absent. See the simplicity. Realize one's true nature. Cast off selfishness. Temper desire. These four are more important than all the sainthood and wisdom and kindness that can be performed, because these four are not performances. They are the living reality of the Tao in a person who has returned to the source and is simply what they are. Lao Tzu writes, "Give up learning and put an end to your troubles." Is there a difference between yes and no? Is there a difference between good and evil? Must I fear what others fear? What nonsense! Other people are contented, enjoying the sacrificial feast of the ox. In spring, some go to the park and climb the terrace. But I alone am drifting, not knowing where I am, like a newborn babe before it learns to smile. I am alone, without a place to go. Lao Tzu is speaking now, in the first person, about himself. He is saying, everyone else seems to know what they want. Everyone else seems to be enjoying themselves, feasting, celebrating, climbing the terrace. And I am drifting, not knowing where I am. He continues, others have a surplus. I alone have nothing. I am a fool. Oh yes, I am confused. Others are clear and bright. I alone am dim and weak. Others are sharp and clever. I alone am dull and stupid. At sea, drifting, never at anchor. Others have a purpose. I alone don't know. I drift like a wave on the ocean. I blow as aimless as the wind. I am different from ordinary people. I drink from the Great Mother's breasts. I drink from the Great Mother's breasts, the last line, which changes everything before it. All the confusion, all the drifting, all the difference from ordinary people. This is not weakness. This is the natural state of the person who has returned to the source, who does not have the ordinary person's certainty, because the ordinary person's certainty is the certainty of someone who trusts their map and has not noticed that the territory is gone. The sage is uncertain because the sage has put down the map and is in the territory, where certainty is not a virtue, but a blindness. And the drifting, the not knowing where I am, the drinking from the Great Mother's breasts, this is the Tao in a person who has let go of everything except the source. Lao Tzu writes in chapter 21, the greatest virtue is to follow Tao, and Tao alone. The Tao is elusive and intangible. Oh, it is intangible and elusive, and yet within it is image. Oh, it is elusive and intangible, and yet within it is substance. Oh, it is dim and dark, and yet within it is essence. This essence is very real, and therein lies faith. From the very beginning until now, its name has never been forgotten. Thus I perceive the creation. How do I know the ways of all things at the beginning? I look inside myself and see what is within me. I look inside myself and see what is within me. The entire Tao Te Ching in one practice. The outward search for the source of things will always miss, because the source is not outside. The source is inside. The Tao that is outside you is the same Tao that is inside you, and you reach the outside Tao through the inside Tao. I look inside myself and see what is within me, not as argument, but as attention, directed inward, where the answers already are. He writes in chapter 22, yield and overcome, bend and be straight, empty and be full, wear out and be new, have little and gain, have much and be confused. Therefore the master embraces the one and becomes a model for the world. She doesn't show off, therefore she shines. She doesn't justify herself, therefore she's universally respected. She doesn't boast, therefore she's recognized. She doesn't compete, therefore no one can compete with her. The ancient saying, "Yield and overcome," is not empty words. Truly become whole, and all things will come to you. She doesn't compete, therefore no one can compete with her. The paradox, again, as always, the person who competes creates competition, who insists on being best invites others to challenge, who needs to be first will always be contested. The person who has stopped competing cannot be competed with, because competition requires two people, both of whom believe that there is something to win and something to lose. The person who has stopped believing this cannot be competed with. Only as yourself, only as what you actually are, complete and whole, not better than anyone else, just fully what the Tao has made you. Truly become whole, and all things will come to you. He writes in chapter 23, "To talk little is natural. High winds do not last all morning. Heavy rain does not last all day. Why is this? Heaven and earth. And if heaven and earth cannot make things eternal, how is it possible that man can? He who follows the Tao is at one with the Tao. He who is virtuous experiences virtue. He who loses the way feels lost. When you are at one with the Tao welcomes you. When you are at one with virtue, the virtue is always there. When you are at one with loss, the loss is experienced willingly. He who does not trust enough will not be trusted. He who does not trust enough will not be trusted. The mirror principle of the Tao. What you withhold is withheld from you. What you give is given back. What you trust is trusted. What you suspect is made suspicious. The universe as a perfect mirror, not as punishment, not as reward, just as the nature of things. He writes in chapter 24, "He who stands on tiptoe is not steady. He who strides cannot maintain the pace. He who makes a show is not enlightened. He who is self-righteous is not respected. He who boasts achieves nothing. He who brags will not endure." According to followers of the Tao, these are extra food and unnecessary luggage. They do not bring happiness. Therefore, followers of the Tao avoid them. Extra food and unnecessary luggage, the striving, the showing off, the self-righteousness, the boasting, not sins, not moral failures, just unnecessary weight that slows you down. That makes you unsteady. That tires you out before you arrive. Extra food that you are carrying but not eating. Unnecessary luggage that makes the journey harder without making the destination better. Put it down, all of it, and walk lighter toward the Tao. He writes in chapter 25, "There was something formless and perfect before the universe was born. It is serene, empty, solitary, unchanging, infinite, eternally present. It is the mother of the universe. For lack of a better name, I call it the Tao. It flows through all things, inside and outside, and returns to the origin of all things. The Tao is great. The universe is great. Earth is great. Man is great. These are the four great powers. Man follows the earth. Earth follows the universe. The universe follows the Tao. The Tao follows only itself. The Tao follows only itself. There is nothing above the Tao, nothing that the Tao obeys, nothing that created the Tao, nothing that the Tao must answer to. The Tao follows only itself, which is to say, the Tao is what it is, and does what it does, and follows its own nature completely. And the teaching for the human being who wants to follow the Tao is this: be what you are, completely. The way the Tao is what it is, completely. Not what you think you should be, not what others require you to be, not the performance of what a good person looks like. Just yourself, fully. The way the Tao follows only itself. He writes in chapter 26, "The heavy is the root of the light. The still is the master of unrest." Realizing this, the sage travels all day without leaving home. However splendid the views, she stays serenely in herself. Why should the lord of the country flit about like a fool? If you let yourself be blown to and fro, you lose touch with your root. If you let restlessness move you, you lose touch with who you are. The heaviness, the weight, the staying is not laziness, is not timidity, is not the failure to engage with the world. It is the rootedness from which all genuine engagement becomes possible. The tree that is deeply rooted can bend in the storm and spring back because the root holds. The tree without roots is blown over by the first serious wind. Stay in yourself. Be heavy. Be still. Be rooted. And from that rootedness, go anywhere, do anything, experience everything, and always come back to yourself, which is where the Tao lives. He writes in chapter 27, "A good traveler has no fixed plans and is not intent on arriving. A good artist lets his intuition lead him wherever it wants. A good scientist has freed himself of concepts and keeps his mind open to what is. Thus the master is available to all people and doesn't reject anyone. She is ready to use all situations and doesn't waste anything. This is called embodying the light. What is a good man but a bad man's teacher? What is a bad man but a good man's job? If you don't understand this, you will get lost, however intelligent you are. It is the great secret. It is the great secret. The good man and the bad man need each other, are each other's work, are each other's teachers. The person who is struggling is not your burden. They are your opportunity to practice compassion, to practice patience, to practice the Tao. And you are their teacher, not by telling them what to do, but by being so clearly what the Tao has made you that they see something that they want to move toward. This is the great secret, that there is no us and them, no good and bad, no teacher and student, only people, all of them, at different points in the same journey toward the same source. He writes in chapter 28, "Know the masculine, keep to the feminine, and be the valley of the world. Being the valley of the world, eternal virtue will never leave you, and you will return to the state of the infant. Know the personal, yet keep to the impersonal, and accept the world as it is. By accepting the world as it is, eternal virtue will fill you, and you will return to the infinite. Know the white, yet keep to the black, and be a model for the world. Return to the absolute, the eternal, the inexhaustible. Return to the absolute, the eternal, the inexhaustible. Know both sides, but keep to the quieter one, the lower one, the darker one, the more feminine one, the valley, not the mountain. Not because the mountain is wrong, but because the valley is where the water flows, and the water is the life. He writes in chapter 29, "Do you want to improve the world? I don't think it can be done. The world is sacred. It can't be improved. If you tamper with it, you'll ruin it. If you treat it like an object, you'll lose it. There is a time for being ahead, a time for being behind, a time for being in motion, a time for being at rest, a time for being vigorous, a time for being exhausted, a time for being safe, a time for being in danger." The master sees things as they are, without trying to control them. She lets them go their own way and resides at the center of the circle, not pushing, not pulling, not trying to control what cannot be controlled. At the center, where all things circle, and the center is still. He writes in chapter 30, "Whoever relies on the Tao in governing men doesn't try to force issues or defeat enemies by force of arms. For every force there is a counterforce. Violence, even well-intentioned, always rebounds upon oneself. The master does his job and then stops. He understands that the universe is forever out of his control and that trying to dominate events goes against the current of the Tao. He doesn't try to convince others because he is content with himself. He doesn't need others' approval because he accepts himself. The whole world accepts him. Because he accepts himself, the whole world accepts him." The final paradox of these 10 chapters. The person who needs acceptance cannot receive it, because the needing drives it away. The person who has accepted themselves does not need it, and so receives it, naturally, from all directions, without effort. This is the Tao. He writes in chapter 31, "Weapons are the tools of violence. All decent men detest them. Therefore, followers of the Tao never use them. Arms serve evil. When you must resort to them, it is best to do so without enjoyment. And if you rejoice in victory, then you delight in killing. If you delight in killing, you cannot fulfill yourself. On happy occasions, precedence is given to the left. On sad occasions, to the right. In the army, the general stands on the right. He is telling you, the army follows the way of sorrow. When you win a war, you celebrate by mourning. When you win a war, you celebrate by mourning. Not because war is never necessary, but because even necessary war involves the death of people who are not the enemy, who are people who had families and mournings and the ordinary life that all living things have and lose. The Tao does not celebrate killing, even necessary killing. It mourns, even victory, because victory means something was lost, even if what was lost had to be stopped. He writes in chapter 32, "The Tao is infinite, eternal." Why is it eternal? It was never born, thus it can never die. Why is it infinite? It has no desires for itself, thus it remains content to support all things. If powerful men and women could remain centered in the Tao, all things would be in harmony. The world would become a paradise. All people would be at peace, and the law would be written in their hearts. When you have names and forms, know that they are provisional. When you have institutions, know where their functions should end. Knowing when to stop, you can avoid any danger. All things end in the Tao, as rivers and streams run into the sea. All things end in the Tao, as rivers and streams run into the sea. The river does not fight. The stream does not resist. They simply go where all water goes, downward, toward the sea, toward the source, toward the Tao. He writes in chapter 33, knowing others is wisdom, knowing yourself is enlightenment. Mastering others requires force. Mastering yourself requires strength. He who knows he has enough is rich. Perseverance is a sign of willpower. He who stays where he is endures. To die but not to perish is to be eternally present. Knowing yourself is enlightenment. Not knowing about yourself, not having theories about yourself, not analyzing yourself, knowing yourself. The way you know the taste of water, the warmth of sun, the fact of breathing, directly, without intermediary, without the translation of the thinking mind, just knowing. He who knows he has enough is rich, not the one with the most, the one who knows they have enough. Because enough is not a number, it is a state of the soul, and the person who has found that state is richer than anyone who has not, regardless of what they have. The great Tao flows everywhere, both to the left and to the right. The 10,000 things depend on it. It holds nothing back. It fulfills its purpose silently and makes no claim. It nourishes the 10,000 things and doesn't leave them out. It has no desires, so it can be called small. The 10,000 things return to it, and it doesn't lord it over them, so it can be called great. It doesn't think of itself as great. That is why it is truly great. It doesn't think of itself as great. That is why it is truly great. The paradox, for the last time in this part, and the most important one. The Tao does not know it is great, does not claim greatness, does not require acknowledgement, does not even notice its own importance. It simply fulfills its purpose silently and makes no claim. And this forgetting of the self in the service of the whole is the definition of true greatness. He writes in chapter 35, all men will come to her who keeps to the one, for there lie rest and happiness and peace. Passers-by may stop for music and good food, but words that point to the Tao seem monotonous and without flavor. When you look for it, there is nothing to see. When you listen for it, there is nothing to hear. When you use it, it is inexhaustible. The Tao cannot be used up. The more you draw from it, the more there is. The more you give from it, the more comes. The well that never runs dry. The source that has no bottom. Because the Tao is not a quantity, not a resource, not something that runs out. It is the nature of things, and the nature of things does not run out. He writes in chapter 36, if you want to shrink something, you must first allow it to expand. If you want to get rid of something, you must first allow it to flourish. If you want to take something, You must first allow it to be given. This is called the subtle perception of the way things are. The soft overcomes the hard. The slow overcomes the fast. Let your workings remain a mystery. Just show people the results. The soft overcomes the hard, water and stone. Water seems weaker, stone seems stronger, but given enough time, the water carves the stone completely, without effort, without violence, without the stone ever noticing until it is too late. The soft overcomes the hard, the slow overcomes the fast. This is the Tao, in action, in time, in the patience of the person who has understood that the Tao does not hurry, and yet everything is accomplished. He writes in chapter 37, "The Tao never does anything, yet through it all things are done." If powerful men and women could center themselves in it, the whole world would be transformed by itself, in its natural rhythms. People would be content with their simple everyday lives, in harmony and free of desire. When there is no desire, all things are at peace. All things are at peace. The center of part 1. The heart of the first half of the Tao Te Ching. The Tao never does anything, and yet through it, all things are done. The paradox, the most paradox, the paradox that contains all the others, not doing, wu wei, and yet everything accomplished, not because of effort, not because of striving, not because of the will imposed on the world, but because of alignment with what the Tao is doing, which is everything, already, without needing help, without needing pushing, without needing the interference of the person who thinks they know what the world should be. The Tao already knows and is already doing it, and all things are already at peace within the Tao. The question is only whether we are within the Tao or fighting it. He writes in chapter 38, "A truly good man is not aware of his goodness, and is therefore good. Man tries to be good, and is therefore not good. A truly good man does nothing, yet leaves nothing undone. A foolish man is always doing things, yet much remains to be done. A truly good man is not aware of his goodness. The person who knows they are good is not good, not completely, because the knowing is a form of holding, a form of possessing, a form of making the goodness a property of the self. And the self that possesses goodness is not the same as the self that simply is good. The way a tree is not virtuous for producing oxygen. The tree is simply a tree, doing what trees do, without knowing it is virtuous. And the oxygen comes. The truly good person is doing what they do, without knowing they are doing good. And the good comes." He writes in chapter 39, "In harmony with the Tao, the sky is clear and spacious. The earth is solid and full. All creatures flourish together, content with the way they are, and all things flow in accordance with the way of nature. Forever cycling through great mysteries. If men were always clear and spacious, it would crack and fall apart. If the earth were always firm and full, it would explode. Each separate existence of its own, as it also expresses the combined existence of all. Never abuse power. except the lowly, common, ordinary. That is why rulers call themselves orphaned, widowed, and worthless. This is their way of expressing humility, for both honor and shame are centered in the self. Esteem the world as yourself. Accept the world as yourself. Then you can truly care for all things. Esteem the world as yourself, not the world as separate from you, not the world as what you live in, not even the world as what you care for, the world as yourself. The Tao does not distinguish between the inside and the outside, between the self and the world, between the individual and the 10,000 things. They are one in the Tao. Who experiences this unity genuinely, not as an idea, but as a felt reality, can truly care for all things, because caring for all things is caring for themselves. And he writes in chapter 40, "Return is the movement of the Tao. Yielding is the way of the Tao. All things are born of being. Being is born of non-being. Return, the movement of the Tao, is always return. Everything goes out and returns. The river to the sea to the cloud to the rain to the river. Everything, in everything, always returning. Yielding. The way of the Tao is always yielding, not forcing, not insisting, not the will imposed on the world. Just the yielding of water that cannot be stopped, because it does not try to advance. It only yields, and in yielding goes everywhere. All things are born of being. Being is born of non-being. The final line of part 1. Everything that is comes from something, and that something comes from nothing, from the emptiness that is not empty, from the non-being that gives birth to all being, from the Tao which cannot be named, but which we have been approaching for 40 chapters now, and which is closer than our next breath and further than the furthest star, and both at the same time. This is the Tao. Part 1 is complete. That is the end. Part 1, chapters 1 through 40 of the Tao Te Ching by Lao Tzu. And what has happened here? We have been given 40 verses, 2,500 years old, in less than 6,000 words, that contain more wisdom than most books 10 times their length. Not because Lao Tzu was smarter than other writers, but because he understood something other writers are still learning. That wisdom cannot be argued into existence, only pointed at, and pointed at again, until the pointing falls away, and the thing itself is seen. What has he pointed at? The Tao, the way, the path, the source, the ground, the unnamed and unnameable principle behind everything, that gives birth to all things and is not diminished by the giving, that nourishes all things and is not depleted by the nourishing, that receives all things and is not filled, that gives to all things and is not emptied, like water, like the center of the wheel, like the emptiness that makes the vessel useful. He has pointed at 40 things. Return to the source, yield and overcome. The highest good is like water. Do your work, then step back. Know yourself. Practice not doing. The soft overcomes the hard. Darkness within darkness. The gate to all mystery. 40 chapters, each one a finger pointing at the same moon. Part 2, chapters 41 through 81, is coming, where Lao Tzu points 41 more times at the same moon, the moon that is not far away, that is right here in the space between this word and the next, in the stillness that this voice is moving through, that was there before the words began and will be there after they end. I'm Jamil, and this is The Classic Mind. The Tao Te Ching, Part 1, is complete. Welcome back to The Classic Mind. Part 1 gave us the first 40 chapters, the Tao that cannot be named, the water that gives life without striving, the valley that never dies, the emptiness that makes the vessel useful, the sage who stays behind and therefore arrives first, the soft that overcomes the hard, the return to the source, and the paradox that runs through all of it. The Tao never does anything, and yet through it, all things are done. Part 2 is chapters 41 through 81, the final 41 verses of the most translated book in the history of the world, after the Bible, written more than 2,500 years ago by a man who may or may not have existed, who may or may not have written these words, who rode into the wilderness on a water buffalo and was never seen again, but left these words, which have never been left alone, by anyone who found them, because truth does not expire. Even the quiet kind, especially the quiet kind. This is part 2 of the Tao Te Ching by Lao Tzu, the final chapters, the end, which is also the beginning. Let us begin slowly. There is still no other way. Lao Tzu writes, when a superior man hears of the Tao, he immediately begins to embody it. When an average man hears of the Tao, he half believes it, half doubts it. When a foolish man hears of the Tao, he laughs out loud. If he didn't laugh, it would not be the Tao. If he didn't laugh, it would not be the Tao. The Tao is not impressive on first hearing. It does not announce itself. It does not dazzle. It does not arrive with proof or argument or the weight of institutional authority. It arrives quietly, as a suggestion, as a possibility, as a slightly different way of looking at the water and the valley and the empty hub. And the foolish man laughs, because it sounds like nothing, because it contradicts everything the world has told him matters. Yield and overcome, he laughs. The soft overcomes the hard, he laughs. Do nothing and everything is done, he laughs. And the Tao does not argue back, does not insist, does not require his approval. It simply is. And the superior man who hears it begins to embody it immediately. Not because he is smarter, not because he is more virtuous, because he is more empty, more ready, more willing to be surprised by what he finds when he stops looking for what he expected. He continues, thus it is said, the path into the light seems dark. The path forward seems to go back. The direct path seems long. True power seems weak. True purity seems tarnished. True steadfastness seems changeable. True clarity seems obscure. The greatest art seems unsophisticated. The greatest love seems indifferent. The greatest wisdom seems childish. The Tao is nowhere to be found, yet it nourishes and completes all things. The path into the light seems dark. Everything about the Tao is the opposite of what we expect. We expect the path toward truth to feel bright and clear, and it feels dark and uncertain. To go forward, and it goes back to the source, to the root, to the beginning. We expect true power to look like power, and it looks like water, soft, yielding, invisible. We expect wisdom to look like sophistication, and it looks like the child who asks the question that the sophisticated adult has forgotten to ask. The Tao is nowhere to be found, and yet it nourishes and completes all things. This is the whole of chapter 41, and the whole of the Tao Te Ching. Lao Tzu writes, "The Tao gives birth to one, one gives birth to two, two gives birth to three, three gives birth to 10,000 things. The 10,000 things carry yin and embrace yang. They achieve harmony by combining these forces. Men hate to be alone, helpless, and unworthy, but this is how kings and lords describe themselves. For one gains by losing, and loses by gaining. The Tao gives birth to one. The source gives birth to unity. Unity gives birth to duality. The yin and the yang, the light and the dark, the full and the empty. Duality gives birth to three: heaven, earth, humanity, or the third thing that arises from any two things in genuine relationship. The child of the parents, the conversation of two minds, the music of two instruments playing together, and from three, everything. The 10,000 things, which is the Chinese way of saying all of creation, every particular thing in all its irreducible specificity, and each of the 10,000 things carries both yin and yang, both darkness and light, both receiving and giving, both feminine and masculine, and achieves harmony by combining these forces, not by eliminating one, not by declaring one superior, by combining, by holding both at the same time. And the king who calls himself alone and helpless and unworthy is not being falsely modest. He is stating the truth of his position, which is that no one stands alone. That helplessness in the face of the Tao is the beginning of wisdom. That being unworthy of the Tao's gift is the most honest thing anyone can say. One gains by losing, and loses by gaining. The paradox. One more time. Always one more time. Lao Tzu writes, "The softest thing in the universe overcomes the hardest thing in the universe. That without substance can enter where there is no room. Hence, I know the value of non-action, teaching without words, performing without actions. That is the master's way, rarely achieved in the world. That without substance can enter where there is no room. Water, again, always water. Water has no fixed form. Water takes the shape of whatever contains it. Water seems to have no substance in the sense of no particular shape. And yet, water enters where nothing else can go, through the hairline crack, into the stone, through the sealed jar, through the impenetrable wall. The water finds the way that force cannot find, that argument cannot find, that will cannot find, because water does not insist on going where it wants to go. It goes where it can go, and where it can go is everywhere, eventually, performing without actions. The Master's Way, the teacher whose presence teaches more than their words, the leader whose being achieves more than their doing, the parent whose love communicates what cannot be said, the friend whose silence says the thing that the right words have never quite managed. Teaching without words, performing without actions, rarely achieved in the world. And this is the only honest thing Lao Tzu says about his own teaching. Rarely achieved. He knows that what he is pointing at cannot be pointed at, that the words he is using to describe the wordless teaching are themselves a betrayal of it. He writes anyway, because the pointing is better than not pointing, even if the pointing is not the moon. Lao Tzu writes, "Fame or integrity, which is more important? Money or happiness, which is more valuable? Success or failure, which is more destructive? If you look to others for fulfillment, you will never truly be fulfilled. If your happiness depends on money, you will never be happy with yourself. Be content with what you have. Rejoice in the way things are. When you realize there is nothing lacking, the whole world belongs to you. When you realize there is nothing lacking, the whole world belongs to you." This is the turning point of chapter 44 and of the entire second half of the Tao Te Ching. Fame or integrity, money or happiness, success or failure. These are not trick questions. They are the questions that every human life must answer by how it is lived, not by what is said. And Lao Tzu's answer is not to choose integrity over fame, or happiness over money, or success over failure. His answer is deeper. Be content with what you have. Rejoice in the way things are. Not because the way things are is always good. Not because contentment means passive acceptance of everything wrong in the world, but because the person who cannot be content with what they have will not be content with what they acquire. And the person who cannot rejoice in the way things are will not rejoice in the way they become. When you realize there is nothing lacking, the whole world belongs to you, not because you own it, because you no longer need to own it. Lao Tzu writes, "Great perfection seems imperfect, yet it is perfectly itself. Great fullness seems empty, yet it is fully present. Great straightness seems twisted. Great intelligence seems stupid. Great eloquence seems awkward. Movement overcomes cold. Stillness overcomes heat. Stillness and tranquility set things in order in the universe. Great perfection seems imperfect, not because it is, but because perfection, as the world understands it, is the elimination of roughness, of variation, of the unexpected, of the beautiful irregularity that makes things alive. The perfect machine has no roughness, no variation, no surprise, and is dead. The great perfection of the Tao includes all roughness, all variation, all surprise, all the beautiful irregularity of the living world, and therefore seems imperfect to the person who expects the dead regularity of the machine. Great intelligence seems stupid because great intelligence knows what it does not know, and says so freely, without the defensive performance of the person who fears that admitting ignorance will make them look stupid, and appear stupid to the person who mistakes the performance for the thing. Stillness and tranquility set things in order in the universe. Not force, not argument, not the will imposed on the world. Stillness, tranquility, the settled water in which everything can be seen clearly. Setting things in order from the inside, from the center, from the source. That is the Tao, setting things in order, always, without effort, without force, without anyone noticing, until they look back and see that somehow everything is exactly as it needed to be. Lao Tzu writes, "When the Tao is present in the universe, the horses haul manure. When the Tao is absent from the universe, more horses are bred outside the city. There is no greater illusion than fear, no greater wrong than preparing to defend yourself, no greater misfortune than having an enemy. Whoever can see through all fear will always be safe. There is no greater illusion than fear. Not that fear is not real. The feeling of fear is completely real. The racing heart, the cold sweat, the contracted chest. But the story that fear tells is almost always an illusion. The fear that the world is dangerous, more dangerous than it is. The fear that the enemy is more powerful than they are. The fear that we will lose what we cannot afford to lose. These stories drive us to build defenses, and defenses invite attack, and attack confirms the fear, and the fear grows. The circle that the Tao breaks, not by eliminating the danger, but by seeing through the fear. Whoever can see through all fear will always be safe. Not physically safe, not protected from every harm. Safe in the way that the Tao is safe, which is not the safety of the fortress, but the safety of the water, which cannot be defeated because it does not fight, which cannot be threatened because it does not hold, which cannot be taken because it does not possess. That safety is always available to the one who sees through fear. Lao Tzu writes, "Without opening your door, you can open your heart to the world. Without looking out your window, you can see the essence of the Tao. The more you know, the less you understand. The master arrives without traveling, sees the light without looking, achieves without doing a thing. Without opening your door, you can open your heart to the world, the inward journey, as the path to the outward understanding. The person who travels everywhere looking for the truth will not find it, because they are looking outside for what is inside. The person who stays still and looks inward will find the truth, and from that truth will understand the world without traveling. The more you know, the less you understand. The more you accumulate of the world's information, the further you get from the world's essence. Because the essence of the world is not information, it is the Tao, which cannot be accumulated, can only be returned to. The master arrives without traveling, because the destination is not somewhere else. It is here. It has always been here. It will always be here. And the arriving is not a journey. It is a recognition of what was always present, but not noticed, because the looking was outward instead of inward. Lao Tzu writes, "In pursuit of learning, every day something is acquired. In pursuit of Tao, every day something is dropped. Less and less is done until non-action is achieved. When nothing is done, nothing is left undone. The world is ruled by letting things take their course. It cannot be ruled by interfering. In pursuit of learning, every day something is acquired. In pursuit of Tao, every day something is dropped. The difference between ordinary learning and the Tao. Ordinary learning is accumulation. Add knowledge, add skill, add experience, add capacity, add more. Always more. The pursuit of the Tao is the opposite. Drop the opinion, drop the certainty, drop the fixed idea, drop the attachment, drop the need to know, drop the need to control, drop more, always more, until the dropping is complete. And what remains is the Tao, which was always there, under the accumulation, under the certainty, under the fixed ideas, under the need. When nothing is done, nothing is left undone. Wu Wei again. The action that is not action, the doing that is not doing, the effortless achievement of everything necessary. Because the person who has stopped interfering allows the Tao to act, and the Tao always knows what to do. The world is ruled by letting things take their course, not by force, not by will, not by the intelligence of the person who thinks they know best, by letting. The most difficult word in the Tao Te Ching. Lao Tzu writes, "The master has no mind of her own. She works with the mind of the people. She is good to people who are good. She is also good to people who aren't good. This is true goodness. She trusts people who are trustworthy. She also trusts people who aren't trustworthy. This is true trust. The master's mind is like space. People don't understand her. They look to her and wait. She treats them like her own children. The master has no mind of her own, not because she is empty, but because her mind is not separate from the mind of the world. The person with a fixed mind sees the world through their fixed mind, and everything they see is filtered through what they already believe, already know, already expect. The master, who has no fixed mind, sees what is actually there, without the filter, without the prior conclusion, without the opinion that was formed before the looking. She is good to people who are good. She is also good to people who aren't good. Not because she cannot tell the difference, but because she understands that goodness is not a reward for goodness. It is the nature of the good person, who is good not because the other person deserves it, but because goodness is what the good person does. She treats them like her own children, with the love that does not require the child to earn it. That is given before the child has done anything. That is given when the child has done everything wrong, because that is what love is. In the Tao, not earned, not conditional, not given in response to merit, just given, the way the Tao gives, to all 10,000 things, without distinction, without preference, without the requirement that they deserve it. Lao Tzu writes, "The master gives himself up to whatever the moment brings. He knows that he is going to die, and he has nothing left to hold on to. He has no illusions about himself and his strength. Having nothing, he has nothing to lose. Reports may come of men rushing for position, but he doesn't follow. He knows that the Tao acts in the world as his own self does, not imposing, but imparting, not commanding, but serving. Having nothing, he has nothing to lose. The freedom that comes from having released everything that could be lost. The person who has much lives in fear of losing it. The fear is proportional to the having. The person who has released the attachment to having cannot be threatened, cannot be manipulated, cannot be controlled by the fear of loss, because there is nothing left to lose. Not because they have given everything away, but because they have given up the claim on what they have. The subtle difference between possession and non-attachment. He knows that the Tao acts in the world as his own self does, not imposing, but imparting, not commanding, but serving. The Tao does not command the river. The Tao is the principle by which the river flows. The sage does not command the people. The sage is the living example of what the Tao looks like in a human being. Not commanding, but serving. Not imposing, but imparting. The quiet gift of the person who has nothing left to hold. Lao Tzu writes, "Every being in the universe is an expression of the Tao. It springs into existence, unconscious, perfect, free, takes on a physical body, lets circumstances complete it. That is why every being spontaneously honors the Tao. The Tao gives birth to all beings, nourishes them, maintains them, cares for them, comforts them, protects them, takes them back to itself, creating without possessing, acting without expecting, guiding without interfering. This is why love of the Tao is in the very nature of things. Creating without possessing, acting without expecting, guiding without interfering, the three qualities of the Tao, as creator and sustainer of all things, but does not expect a return, does not require gratitude, does not need acknowledgement, just acts. And the action is complete in itself. It guides, but does not interfere. The way the river guides the water by being the channel, not by pushing, not by commanding, by simply being what the water flows through. This is the love of the Tao that is in the very nature of things, not a sentiment, not a feeling, a structural principle of how everything works, creating without possessing, acting without expecting, guiding without interfering. This is love, as the Tao understands it. Lao Tzu writes, "In the beginning was the Tao. All things issue from it. All things return to it. To find the origin, trace back the manifestations. When you recognize the children and find the mother, you will be free of sorrow. If you close your mind in judgments and traffic with desires, your heart will be troubled. If you keep your mind from judging and aren't led by the senses, your heart will find peace. Seeing into darkness is clarity. Knowing how to yield is strength. Use your own light and return to the source of light. This is called practicing eternity. Practicing eternity, not preparing for eternity, not waiting for eternity, not hoping for eternity, practicing it now, in this moment, in the way the moment is met, with the open mind, with the non-judging heart, with the willingness to see into darkness with clarity, with the strength of knowing when to yield. Practicing eternity is the practice of the Tao. In the ordinary moments of the ordinary day, not in the temple, not in the monastery, not in the extraordinary experience, in the cup of tea, in the breath between words, in the simple, honest attention to what is actually here, returning to the source of light, not because the source is far away, because the source is right here and has always been right here. And we have been practicing finding it for 2,500 years and are still practicing. This is called practicing eternity. Lao Tzu writes, "The great way is easy, yet people prefer the side paths." Be aware when things are out of balance. Stay centered within the Tao. When rich speculators prosper while farmers lose their land, when government officials spend money on weapons instead of cures, when the upper class is extravagant and irresponsible while the poor have nowhere to turn. All this is robbery and chaos. It is not in keeping with the Tao. The great way is easy, not simple, not without challenge, but easy in the sense that it does not require what is against nature, does not require the suppression of what is good, does not require the performance of what is false. The great way is easy because it is simply the way things actually work, the way water actually flows, the way seeds actually grow, the way breath actually moves, the way the heart actually loves. It is not difficult to follow. It is only difficult to stop following. All the alternatives, the side paths, the paths of cleverness and acquisition and power and the performance of virtue without the living reality of it. The side paths are where the difficulty is, not the great way. The great way is easy, and people prefer the side paths. This has always been true. This will always be true. And Lao Tzu notes it, without contempt, without judgment, just noting and staying centered within the Tao, while the world takes its side paths and eventually returns to the great way, which was easy all along. Lao Tzu writes, "Whoever is planted in the Tao will not be rooted up. Whoever embraces the Tao will not slip away. Her name will be held in honor from generation to generation. Let the Tao be present in your life, and you will become genuine. Let it be present in your family, and your family will flourish. Let it be present in your country, and your country will be an example to all countries in the world. Let it be present in the universe, and the universe will sing." How do I know this is true? By looking inside myself. By looking inside myself. Chapter 47 told us this, and chapter 52 told us this, and now chapter 54. The same teaching, the same pointing, at the same moon, from the inside, not from outside. How do I know the Tao is real? How do I know the Tao works? How do I know the Tao will root you so deeply that nothing can uproot you? By looking inside myself, where the Tao is already, as it always has been, as it always will be, not as a theory, not as a philosophy, not as a belief, as an experience of the lived reality, of the person who has turned inward and found what was waiting there. This is Lao Tzu's authority, not a degree, not a position, not the endorsement of any institution. By looking inside myself, this is where all his knowledge comes from. And this is where yours can come from, if you choose to look inside yourself where the Tao is and always has been. Lao Tzu writes, "He who is in harmony with the Tao is like a newborn child. Its bones are soft, its muscles are weak, but its grip is firm. It doesn't know about the union of male and female, yet its penis can stand erect. So intense is its vital power. It can scream its head off all day, yet it never becomes hoarse. So complete is its harmony. The master's power is like this. He lets all things come and go, effortlessly, without desire. He never expects results. Thus, he is never disappointed. He is never disappointed. Thus, his spirit never grows old. His spirit never grows old. The child who does not know it has a spirit, and therefore the spirit is completely present, completely alive, completely itself. The adult who has learned to know, who has accumulated, who has carried and been carried by the weight of what they know, grows old in the spirit, not because years have passed, but because the freshness has been replaced by certainty, the openness by conclusion, the aliveness by the habit of being alive. The master who has returned to the child in the spirit never expects results, thus never disappointed, never disappointed, thus the spirit never grows old. This is the gift of the Tao to those who return to it. Not youth, not the body that does not age, but the spirit that never closes, never hardens, never loses the newborn's firm grip on the world, exactly as it is. Lao Tzu writes, "Those who know don't talk. Those who talk don't know. Close your mouth, block off your senses, blunt your sharpness, untie your knots, soften your glare, settle your dust. This is the primal identity. Be like the Tao. It can't be approached or withdrawn from, benefited or harmed, honored or disgraced, and so it is the highest state of man. Those who know don't talk. Those who talk don't know." The most famous line of chapter 56, and one of the most misunderstood. He is not saying that the wise are silent always. He is saying that wisdom cannot be fully communicated through speech. The moment you say what the Tao is, you have already missed it, because the saying is not the being. The teacher who can tell you about love has not necessarily experienced love. The philosopher who can argue beautifully for the importance of presence may not be present. The preacher who speaks eloquently about surrender may not have surrendered. Those who know in a way that speaking cannot fully convey. And they know this, and so they speak carefully, or less, or let the living example do what the words cannot. Those who talk may not know this, and so they speak freely and confidently and at length, and the speaking is mistaken for the knowing. This is the teaching of chapter 56, and Lao Tzu, who wrote it, knew the irony of every word. Lao Tzu writes, "If you want to be a great leader, you must learn to follow the Tao. Stop trying to control. Let go of fixed plans and concepts, and the world will govern itself. The more prohibitions you have, the less virtuous people will be. The more weapons you have, the less secure people will be. The more subsidies you have, the less self-reliant people will be. Therefore, the Master says, I let go of the law, and people become honest. I let go of economics, and people become prosperous. I let go of religion, and people become serene. I let go of all desire for the common good, and the good becomes common. I let go of all desire for the common good, and the good becomes common. The final paradox of the governing chapters. The more you try to create goodness, the less goodness there is, because the trying implies that goodness is not already here, and the implying teaches people to doubt it. Who lets go of the desire for the common good? Who trusts that the Tao in people will produce goodness without being commanded to, finds that goodness becomes common, not because of the letting go, but because of the trust that the letting go expresses. The deep trust in the Tao that is in all things, including the people who were already good before anyone tried to make them. Lao Tzu writes, if a country is governed with tolerance, the people are comfortable and honest. If a country is governed with repression, the people are depressed and crafty. When the will to power is in charge, the higher the ideals, the lower the results. Try to make people happy, and you lay the groundwork for misery. Try to make people moral, and you lay the groundwork for vice. Thus, the Master is content to serve as an example, and not to impose her will. She is pointed but doesn't pierce, straightforward but supple, radiant but easy on the eyes. Radiant but easy on the eyes, not the blinding light of the person who has seen truth and demands that you look at it. The gentle light of the person who has found something and holds it quietly, not insisting, not blinding. Radiant but easy on the eyes, the pointed person who doesn't pierce, who has something sharp, something precise, something that cuts through confusion, but does not wound. The straightforward person who is supple, who speaks the truth, but with the flexibility of the person who knows that truth has many faces, and their face of it is not the only one. This is the Master, content to serve as an example and not to impose her will, not because she has no will, but because she has found something larger than her will and rests in it, and from that resting becomes an example. Lao Tzu writes, for governing a country well, there is nothing better than moderation. The mark of a moderate man is freedom from his own ideas, tolerant like the sky, all-pervading like sunlight, firm like a mountain, supple like a tree in the wind. He has no destination in view and makes use of anything life throws his way. Nothing is impossible for him. Because he is let go, he can care for the people's welfare, as a mother cares for her child. As a mother cares for her child, the image of the mother, again, as it appears throughout the Tao Te Ching, not the commanding father, not the demanding authority, not the enforcer of rules, the mother who cares without condition, who nourishes without expecting gratitude, who protects without possessing, who lets go when the child is ready to go. This is the model for governance, for leadership, for any relationship in which one person has power over another, not force, not control, not the will imposed. Care, as a mother cares for a child, This is the most radical political idea in the history of Chinese philosophy, possibly in the history of all philosophy. Lao Tzu writes, "Governing a great country is like cooking a small fish. Too much poking spoils the meat." When you govern the country by the principle of the Tao, evil is not powerful. Not that it isn't there, but it has no power. Not only does it have no power over others, but it has no power over the sage. If you give evil nothing to oppose, it will disappear by itself. Governing a great country is like cooking a small fish. Too much poking spoils the meat. Leave it alone. Trust the process. Trust the heat. Trust the fish. The impulse to poke, to interfere, to check, to adjust, to control, spoils the fish every time, and spoils the country every time. If you give evil nothing to oppose, it will disappear by itself. Evil, like fear, like the side paths, like the person who needs to be loudest in the room, requires opposition. Give it opposition, and it grows. Challenge it, and it strengthens. Fight it, and it will grow more, not less. That is the way of things, and it finds the justification it was looking for. Give it nothing to oppose, and it disappears by itself. Not because the Tao is passive, but because the Tao knows the nature of things, and the nature of evil requires an enemy. The Tao refuses to be one. Lao Tzu writes, "When a country obtains great power, it becomes like the sea. All streams run downward into it. The more powerful it grows, the greater the need for humility. Humility means trusting the Tao, thus never needing to be defensive. A great nation is like a great man. When he makes a mistake, he realizes it. Having realized it, he admits it. Having admitted it, he corrects it. He considers those who point out his faults as his most benevolent teachers. He thinks of his enemy as the shadow that he himself casts. He thinks of his enemy as the shadow that he himself casts." The most psychologically precise observation in the second half of the Tao Te Ching. The enemy is not separate from us. The enemy is the projection of what we will not acknowledge in ourselves, the shadow that we ourselves cast, and the nation or the person who can recognize this, who can look at the enemy and ask, "What in me does this person reflect?" That nation or person is free from the endless cycle of fighting the shadow, which grows with every fight and is released by recognition. He considers those who point out his faults as his most benevolent teachers. The most mature political wisdom in the second half of the book. The critic is not the enemy. The critic is the teacher. The leader who knows this is already close to the Tao. Lao Tzu writes, "The Tao is the center of the universe, the good man's treasure, the bad man's refuge. Honors can be bought with fine words. Respect can be won with good deeds. But the Tao is beyond all value, and no one can achieve it. Thus, when a new leader is chosen, don't offer to help him with your wealth or your expertise. Offer instead to teach him about the Tao. Why do the ancient masters esteem the Tao? Because when you seek it, you find it. And when you make mistakes, you are forgiven. That is why everybody loves it. The bad man's refuge, not just the good man's treasure, the bad man's refuge. This is one of the most important things Lao Tzu says about the Tao. It is not reserved for the virtuous, not available only to those who have earned it, not given as a reward for good behavior. It is the refuge of the person who has done wrong, who is lost, who has taken every side path and found themselves in the wilderness, and can return at any moment to the Tao that was waiting, without judgment, without the requirement that they had not strayed, without the condition that they had stayed pure. When you make mistakes, you are forgiven. That is why everybody loves it. The Tao that forgives automatically, not because it chooses to forgive, but because it does not hold what was done, because the Tao is always now, and now is always the beginning of the return. Lao Tzu writes, "Act without doing, work without effort. Think of the small as large, and the few as many. Confront the difficult while it is still easy. Accomplish the great task by a series of small acts. The master never reaches for the great. Thus she achieves greatness. When she runs into a difficulty, she stops and gives herself to it. She doesn't cling to her own comfort. Thus, problems are no problem for her. Confront the difficult while it is still easy. Accomplish the great task by a series of small acts." The most practical chapter in the second half of the Tao Te Ching. The great task seems impossible because it is seen as one task, one enormous thing that requires an enormous effort all at once. But the great task is always made of small acts, done one after another, over time, without grasping for the greatness, without reaching for the result. Just the next small act, and then the next, and then the next, arrives, not as the intended result, but as the natural consequence of 10,000 small acts done in alignment with the Tao. The master never reaches for the great. Thus, she achieves greatness. This is not a trick. This is the nature of things. Greatness cannot be grasped, only grown into. Lao Tzu writes, "What is rooted is easy to nourish. What is recent is easy to correct. What is brittle is easy to break. What is small is easy to scatter. Prevent trouble before it arises. Put things in order before they exist." The giant pine tree grows from a tiny sprout. The journey of 1,000 miles starts from beneath your feet. Rushing into action, you fail. Trying to grasp things, you lose them. Forcing a project to completion, you ruin what was almost ripe. Therefore, the master takes action by letting things take their course. He remains as calm at the end as at the beginning. He has nothing, thus has nothing to lose. What he desires is non-desire. What he learns is to unlearn. He simply reminds people of who they have always been. He cares about nothing but the Tao. Thus he can care for all things. The journey of 1,000 miles starts from beneath your feet, not from somewhere else, not from a grand beginning, not from the moment of decision, or the moment of inspiration, or the moment of commitment, from beneath your feet, from here, from now, from the step that is already possible, before the second step is even visible. What he desires is non-desire. What he learns is to unlearn. the final curriculum of the Tao, not the accumulation of more and better desires, but the release of the grasping that desire always brings, not the learning of more and better knowledge, but the unlearning of the certainties that block the Tao. He simply reminds people of who they have always been. This is teaching in the Tao, not giving people something new, reminding them of something old, the oldest thing, themselves, before the accumulation, before the performance, before the side paths, themselves, who have always been exactly what the Tao made them, and have simply forgotten. Lao Tzu writes, "The ancient masters didn't try to educate the people, but kindly taught them to not know. When they think that they know the answers, people are difficult to guide. When they know that they don't know, people can find their own way. If you want to learn how to govern, avoid being clever or rich. The simplest pattern is the clearest. Content with an ordinary life, you can show all people the way back to their own true nature. Kindly taught them to not know. This is the entire purpose of the Tao Te Ching. Not to teach, but to unteach, not to give answers, but to dissolve the false certainties that prevent the true answers from being found. When they think they know the answers, people are difficult to guide, because the person who already knows cannot be taught, cannot be guided, cannot be led to the place where the real knowing begins, which is the place of not knowing. The Tao that cannot be named, the wisdom that looks like foolishness, the teaching that teaches by not teaching. Content with an ordinary life, you can show all people the way back to their own true nature, not through the extraordinary life, not through the impressive achievement, not through the visible greatness, through the ordinary life, lived simply, fully in the Tao. This is the most accessible and most demanding teaching in the book. The ordinary life as the path back to the true nature. Lao Tzu writes, "All streams flow to the sea because it is lower than they are. Humility gives it its power. If you want to govern the people, you must place yourself below them. If you want to lead the people, you must learn how to follow them. The master is above the people, and no one feels oppressed. She goes ahead of the people, and no one feels manipulated. The whole world is grateful to her, because she competes with no one. No one can compete with her. All streams flow to the sea, because it is lower than they are, not higher, lower. The sea does not rise to receive the rivers. The sea sinks below everything, the lowest point in the landscape, and everything flows to it. This is the teaching of the valley, and the feminine, and the water, and the child. The lowest place receives everything, because everything flows downward. The highest place receives nothing, because nothing flows upward. If you want to lead the people, you must learn how to follow them, not in the sense of doing whatever they want, but in the sense of being behind them, behind their needs, behind their well-being, behind what they require, in service of what they actually need. And from that place of being behind, genuinely, you lead, because the people feel that they are going where they need to go, and the leader is helping them get there, not taking them somewhere the leader has decided they should be. This is the highest form of leadership in the Tao. We arrive now at the most important chapter of Part 2, the chapter that contains the 3 treasures. He writes, "Everyone under heaven says that the Tao is great, but it doesn't resemble anything. It is great precisely because it doesn't resemble anything. If it resembled something, it would have been small from the start. I have 3 treasures, which I hold and cherish. The first is mercy. The second is frugality. The third is not daring to be ahead of the world. 3 treasures, not power, not wisdom, not the extraordinary gifts of the exceptional person. Mercy, frugality, not daring to be ahead of the world." He continues, "From mercy comes courage. From frugality comes generosity. From not daring to be ahead of the world comes the ability to lead the world. Today, people reject mercy and try to be courageous. They reject frugality and try to be generous. They reject following and try to be first. This is fatal. This is fatal. The 3 reversals that the world makes. The world tries to be courageous without mercy. The Tao says courage comes from mercy, not from the suppression of softness, but from the depth of caring that makes you willing to act when acting is necessary, even when it is dangerous. The world tries to be generous without frugality. The Tao says generosity comes from frugality, from having learned to need little, and from needing little, having much to give. The person who needs everything has nothing to spare. The world tries to be first without following. The Tao says leadership comes from service, from being behind, from not daring to be ahead, from the valley that receives all streams. He continues, mercy in battle leads to victory. In defense, it leads to security. When heaven wants to protect someone, it guards them with mercy. When heaven wants to protect someone, it guards them with mercy. Not with armor, not with weapons, not with walls, not with the force that everyone can see, with mercy, which is the quality of the Tao itself, that gives without possessing, nourishes without claiming, creates without controlling. Mercy, the first treasure, the source of courage, the protection of heaven, the whole of the Tao Te Ching in one word. Lao Tzu writes, "The best athlete wants his opponent at his best. The best general enters the mind of his enemy. The best businessman serves the communal good. The best leader follows the will of the people. All of them embody the virtue of non-competition. Not that they don't love to compete, but they do it in the spirit of play. In this they are like children, and in harmony with the Tao. The best athlete wants his opponent at his best, not weakened, not compromised, not fighting with less than they have, at their best, because the best athlete wants to know what they can actually do against the best opposition, not against a weakened opponent. That would tell them nothing real. And the best general enters the mind of his enemy, not to defeat the enemy, to understand them, so completely that the conflict can be resolved before it becomes battle. All of them embody the virtue of non-competition, not that they don't love to compete, but that they do it in the spirit of play. The child who plays is not playing to win, is playing to play, is in the activity itself, without the overlay of the outcome, without the grasping, without the fear of loss, without the desperate clinging to the first place that defines so much of what passes for competition in the world. In harmony with the Tao, which is always playing and never grasping and never loses because it never tries to win. He writes in chapter 69, the generals have a saying, rather than make the first move, it is better to wait and see. Rather than advance an inch, it is better to retreat a yard. This is called going forward without advancing, rolling up your sleeves without baring your arms, capturing the enemy without attacking, being armed without weapons. There is no greater misfortune than underestimating your enemy. Underestimating your enemy means thinking that he is evil. Thus you destroy your three treasures and become an enemy yourself. When two great forces oppose each other, the victory will go to the one who knows how to yield. The victory will go to the one who knows how to yield. Water and stone. Always water and stone. He writes in chapter 70, "My teachings are easy to understand and easy to put into practice, yet your intellect will never grasp them, and if you try to practice them, you'll fail. How can you grasp their meaning? If you want to know me, look inside your heart. Look inside your heart, not inside your head, not inside your arguments, not inside the accumulated wisdom of what you have been taught. Inside your heart, where the Tao lives already." He writes in chapter 71, "Not knowing is true knowledge. Presuming to know is a disease. First realize that you are sick. Then you can move toward health. The master is her own physician. She has healed herself of all knowing. Thus she is truly whole. Not knowing is true knowledge. Presuming to know is a disease. This is the cure for the disease that the Tao Te Ching has been diagnosing since chapter 1. The disease of certainty, the disease of presuming to know, the disease of the full bowl that cannot receive what is offered. The cure is simple, not knowing, true knowledge." He writes in chapter 72, "When they lose their sense of awe, people turn to religion. When they no longer trust themselves, they begin to depend on authority. Therefore, the master steps back so that people won't be confused. He teaches without a teaching so that people will have nothing to learn. He teaches without a teaching so that people will have nothing to learn. The fullest expression of Wu Wei as applied to teaching, the teaching that is so completely the Tao in action, that the student does not know they have been taught, does not have a lesson to memorize, or a doctrine to defend, or a teaching to repeat, just a shift in how they see, in how they are, because the teacher was the Tao, and the Tao teaches without teaching. He writes in chapter 73, "The Tao is always at ease. It overcomes without competing, answers without speaking, arrives without being summoned, accomplishes without a plan. Its net covers the whole universe, and though its meshes are wide, it doesn't let a thing slip through. Its net covers the whole universe, and though its meshes are wide, it doesn't let a thing slip through. Everything is held. In the Tao, nothing falls through, nothing is lost, Nothing is forgotten. Nothing is beyond the reach of the net that is not a net, that has no edges, that covers everything without covering anything. He writes in chapter 74, "If you realize that all things change, there is nothing you will try to hold on to. If you aren't afraid of dying, there is nothing you can't achieve. Trying to control the future is like trying to take the master carpenter's place. When you handle the master carpenter's tools, chances are that you'll cut your hand. If you realize that all things change, there is nothing you will try to hold on to. This is the root of all the Tao Te Ching's practical wisdom, the recognition of impermanence, not as a sad fact, as a liberating one. The person who knows that all things change can hold them lightly, use them while they are here, release them when they go, and not be broken by the going." He writes in chapter 75, "When taxes are too high, people go hungry. When the government is too intrusive, people lose their spirit. Act for the people's benefit. Trust them. Leave them alone. Trust them. Leave them alone." The simplest political philosophy ever written in the smallest number of words. He writes in chapter 76, "A man is born gentle and weak. At his death he is hard and stiff. Green plants are tender and filled with sap. At their death they are withered and dry. Therefore the stiff and unbending is the disciple of death. The gentle and yielding is the disciple of life. Thus an army without flexibility never wins a battle. A tree that is unbending is easily broken. The hard and strong will fall. The soft and weak will overcome. The hard and strong will fall. The soft and weak will overcome." The teaching of water, said one more time, as it was said at the beginning. The tree that bends in the storm survives. The tree that does not bend breaks. Gentleness, flexibility, the willingness to yield. These are not weakness. These are the qualities of the living thing. And he writes in chapter 77, "As it acts in the world, the Tao is like the bending of a bow. The top is bent downward. The bottom is bent up. It adjusts excess and deficiency so that there is perfect balance. It takes from what is too much and gives to what isn't enough. Those who try to control, who use force to protect their power, go against the direction of the Tao. They take from those who don't have enough and give to those who have too much. The master can keep giving because there is no end to her wealth. She acts without expectation, succeeds without taking credit, and doesn't think that she is better than anyone else. Doesn't think that she is better than anyone else. Of the wisdom of the Tao, about power, and about the self. The person who has found the Tao does not think they are better, not because they are falsely modest, but because the Tao has dissolved the comparison. The person in the Tao is not in competition with anyone, not better, not worse, not above, not below, just in the Tao, which does not rank, does not compare, does not evaluate, just is and nourishes and gives and takes nothing back and asks nothing and receives everything because it does not possess and therefore cannot be taken from and therefore has infinite wealth to give. We arrive now at the most famous chapter of the second half. He writes, Nothing in the world is as soft and yielding as water. Yet for dissolving the hard and inflexible, nothing can surpass it. The soft overcomes the hard. The gentle overcomes the rigid. Everyone knows this is true, but few can put it into practice. Therefore, the master remains serene in the midst of sorrow. Evil cannot enter his heart. Because he has given up helping, he is people's greatest help. True words seem paradoxical. True words seem paradoxical. Lao Tzu, ending the most important chapter of Part 2 with the acknowledgement of everything he has been doing. True words seem paradoxical. The soft overcomes the hard. True, paradoxical. The leader who follows leads. True, paradoxical. The one who gives up helping helps most. True, paradoxical. The Tao that cannot be named can be returned to. True, paradoxical. The empty vessel is most useful. Paradoxical. 81 verses of true words that seem paradoxical. Because truth does not fit inside the categories that ordinary thinking has built. Truth breaks the categories, and the breaking looks like paradox, but it is not. It is simply the Tao, more real than the categories, and therefore seeming to contradict them. True words seem paradoxical. This is the last word Lao Tzu speaks about the nature of his own teaching. Remember it as we arrive at the end. He writes in chapter 79, "Failure is an opportunity. If you blame someone else, there is no end to the blame. Therefore, the master fulfills her own obligations and corrects her own mistakes. She does what she needs to do and demands nothing of others. After a bitter quarrel, some resentment must linger. What can one do about it? Therefore, the master fulfills her own obligations and demands nothing of others. The Tao never takes sides. It gives victory to those who are in harmony with it. Failure is an opportunity, the most countercultural teaching in the Tao Te Ching. In a world that fears failure above almost everything, failure is an opportunity, not a shame, not a catastrophe, not the end, an opportunity to see more clearly, to return more honestly to the Tao. That does not require success. To be what it is, the Tao never takes sides. It gives victory to those who are in harmony with it, not to the good, not to the righteous, not to the powerful, to those in harmony with it. The alignment, not the virtue, not the effort, the harmony with the Tao that moves through all things and gives victory to those who move with it and leaves behind those who move against. He writes in chapter 80, "If a country is governed wisely, its inhabitants will be content. They enjoy the labor of their hands and don't waste time inventing labor-saving machines. Since they dearly love their homes, they aren't interested in travel. There may be a few wagons and boats, but these don't go anywhere. There may be an arsenal of weapons, but nobody ever uses them. People enjoy their food, take pleasure in being with their families, spend weekends working in their gardens, delight in the doings of the neighborhood. And even though the next country is so close that people can hear, its roosters crowing and its dogs barking, they are content to die of old age, without ever having gone to see it. Content to die of old age, without ever having gone to see it. This is the vision of the Taoist life. Not the life of conquest, not the life of expansion, not the life of the empire that must always grow or feel that it is failing. The small life, the local life, the life rooted in one place, one community, one garden, one family, content, not because it has everything, because it knows that it has enough. And enough is not a number, it is a state of the soul. This chapter was written in the 3rd century BC and is more urgent now than it has ever been. In the age of global everything, endless travel, constant stimulation, the roosters 1,000 countries crowing in our pockets every moment, and we are less content, not more, because contentment was never about distance. It was always about here and now and enough, which has always been available to anyone who stopped looking somewhere else for what was here all along. We arrive now at the final chapter, chapter 81, the last of the 81 verses of the most translated book in the history of the world, after the Bible, written more than 2,500 years ago by a man who rode away on a water buffalo into the wilderness and was never seen again. He writes, "True words are not beautiful. Beautiful words are not true. Wise men don't need to prove their point. Men who need to prove their point aren't wise. The master has no possessions. The more he does for others, the happier he is. The more he gives to others, the wealthier he becomes. The Tao nourishes by not forcing, by not dominating. The master leads. True words are not beautiful. Beautiful words are not true. The last paradox, the last pointing, at the last moon. True words are not beautiful, not in the way that beautiful words are beautiful, not with the surface shine, the satisfying phrase, the elegant construction. True words are simply true, and truth has a different quality than beauty, although sometimes they coincide, and when they do, that is the greatest art ever made by any human being, in any language, in any time. The Tao Te Ching itself is one of those moments when true words are also beautiful, and beautiful words are also true. He continues, "Wise men don't need to prove their point. Men who need to prove their point aren't wise. Wise men don't need to prove their point, because the wise man is not attached to the point, is not identified with the arguments, is not defined by being right. The wise man says what he sees, and if you disagree, he does not argue. He looks again and considers, and if he was wrong, he says so, without shame, without the desperate defense of the person whose self-worth is bound up in being right. And if he was right, he does not insist that something other than truth is driving." He continues, "The master has no possessions. The more he does for others, the happier he is. The more he gives to others, the wealthier he becomes. The more he gives, the wealthier he becomes." The final paradox, the final statement of the nature of the Tao in a person who has understood that giving is not loss, that sharing is not depletion, that love is not diminished by being extended, that wealth in the Tao is not a fixed quantity that decreases as you give, but an infinite quality that increases with every giving, because the source of all giving is the Tao, which is inexhaustible, and the person who gives from the Tao gives from the inexhaustible source, and cannot be depleted, and becomes wealthier with every gift. And he writes the final line, "The Tao nourishes by not forcing, by not dominating, the master leads. The Tao nourishes by not forcing." The final statement of the final chapter of the most translated book in the history of the world, after the Bible. The Tao nourishes by not forcing, not by commanding, not by demanding, not by the will imposed on the world, not by the power that requires submission, by nourishing, the way rain nourishes, the way sun nourishes, the way the earth nourishes, without asking, without requiring, without the condition that the plant deserves it, by not forcing, by letting, by yielding, by the way of water that goes where it can go and nourishes everything it touches and cannot be stopped. The Tao nourishes by not forcing, by not dominating. The master leads. This is the end of the Tao Te Ching. The beginning is the same as the end. The Tao that cannot be named nourishes by not forcing, by not dominating. The master leads, as it was and is and will be, for as long as there are rivers and the sea and rain and the valley that never dies, and the empty hub, and the vessel whose usefulness is its emptiness. For as long as there is water, the Tao is. That is the end. Chapter 81, Part 2, complete. The Tao Te Ching by Lao Tzu. Complete. 81 verses, 5,000 characters, written more than 2,500 years ago by a man who rode away on a water buffalo and left us this. What has it said? In all 81 chapters, in all the pointing at the same moon, one thing only, the Tao is here, not somewhere else, not in the temple, not in the extraordinary experience, not in the peak of the mountain. Here, in the emptiness of the vessel, in the softness of the water, in the yielding of the valley, in the returning to the root, in the stillness that sets things in order, in the doing nothing through which all things are done, in the giving that makes you wealthier, in the leading that follows, in the knowing that knows it does not know, in the life lived simply, fully, without forcing, in the word that cannot be said, but which every one of these 81 verses has been trying to say. The Tao, which is here, which has always been here, which will always be here, in the breath between these words and the next words, in the silence after the last word. I'm Jamil, and this is the Classic Mind. The Tao Te Ching by Lao Tzu is complete.